Hello everybody, welcome back. My external crashed before I went live. My apologies. I'm going to start off with a song called Atomic Corruption. And that's by James Lucid on YouTube. It's an anti-nuclear song with a story to it. He does all the music, graphic, and everything. I'll be right back after that.
Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain. Heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell. Still denied what tests could tell. Open air, no tent in place. Children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust. You won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption, carried down the river bend. Across the state, you can't pretend. This don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer, no cause named. Dust in schools they never claimed. No swab, no test, no agency. Just buried deep bureaucracy. They said too costly to contain, but built a dud dump across the drain. Green up CO2, same report filed. The fish are gone, blame climate change. Atomic corruption, stamped and sealed, they walked away. Still the isotopes don't stray. Bound to air, not bound to say. Atomic corruption, they marked 5 counties in the plan. Laughed at Kentucky's open land. Told us hillbillies won't understand. Technetium track 14 miles. Same as plant, same toxic file. Lawrence Livermore drew the lines, but DOE said never mind. Birth smell form, no press release. No study done, no state police. The river holds what they won't name. Atomic corruption, open air across the fields. Science told them never healed, but profit hides what power shields. Atomic corruption, it don't fade, it won't forgive. Still inside the lives we live. This is not a claim. Atomic corruption, it is.
Atomic Corruption is the name of the song. Fantastic song. You really got to listen to it with headphones on to really get. Here we go. Rock and roll. Atomic Corruption. Holy crap. So, I got a really good show for you tonight. A lot of legacy stuff to cover. Because it's really important stuff, the original headlines, particularly that first 7 days. It's just an absurd amount of that material there. And we're going to go to this screen just in case people are using cell phones or tablets or really good stuff like that. And how's these wonderful people, all you wonderful people? Looks good. Too bad I don't. Tokyo Electric Power Company, the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. So this is 2019, and this is Reactor 3. Okay. Let's go back to 2011. Reactor 3 actually ejected the reactor core and the fuel pool right out of the building. TEPCO. Send us people who don't mind dying. Too bad he didn't send them Veritasium. He deserves to go there in a paper suit and disappear from our planet. I can tell you that much, and I'll show you that much coming up. What a terrible, rotten human he actually is. But that's reactor 3. So how can it look like that when it actually looked like that and it done this? How does anybody know how that works? How can the fuel pools, reactor cores are at the top of the buildings? This is 2012, by the way. And they put this contraption over it. That's it there. You can see the guts of the building, right? The contraption, the foundation for the contraption, they built it off-site and then assembled it there. Mostly with remote-controlled cranes. Probably sacrificed a few hundred homeless people, no doubt. It doesn't physically touch reactor 3 because clearly that can't bear a load, right? I just want to explain to you how crazy the pro-nuclear community and the people that apologize for it actually are. They're covering up. This is so significant. And just remember, it's not just reactor 3. It's 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools, right? All alongside of each other. We've never seen anything like this. It's a very important story. Okay, so they put this contraption over it. But when you look at the building, now you'll never see these pictures I'm going to show you anywhere else. They had released a very high quality picture. And I updated all of my pictures the weekend for everybody. But I'm still going to use whatever is appropriate for the story. But I got some great stuff I forgot about. Not forgot about, we haven't used for half a decade or, a few years or something. And hopefully everything goes a lot better. Let me try that again. Wrong one. I was like, I got it all figured out. Tonight will be smooth. And it is so far. So far, so good. So far, so good. Yeah, I got some great pictures for you tonight. And of course, these stories never go fast, right? So they put these contraptions over both of these stumps. That's reactor 3, reactor 4 stump. They put these contraptions over it. But when you look at it, you can see, right, the discrepancies. It can't look like this, and when you look into the building, it looks like that. Now, this is what the building originally looked like. The fuel pools are at the top of the building. So let's flash ahead to 2021, actually. When here's the media saying they're on top of the building. They've done the same thing for reactor 4. And they got away with it. So the more they get away with it, the more likely they are to do even more terrible stuff to this planet and people. So this is just a handful of the media, less than a handful, 4 of the massive amount of media that claimed that the building was intact and the fuel pools looked like that for reactor 4. So I'm going to talk about that for 1 second. I screwed up. So reactor 3, they've done the same thing. Reactor 3, the fuel pools, the building doesn't exist, 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story building. But in 2021, the media claimed they got all the fuel out of the pool, despite the fact that anybody that breathes air and drinks water, you would hope, would know the difference that it ejected the reactor core, the fuel pools out of the building. I know it's confusing. It'll get better for you. So this was 2021. TEPCO transfers some fuel from Fukushima plant number 3, which was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And this is the official pictures. This is official pictures. But you can't be at the top of the building when the top of the building doesn't exist. So this is a clear lie. But that didn't stop them. They're on the top floor of the number 3 reactor building where they put a contraption over. You can't put a contraption there and say that now it's a fuel pool. Now everything is back to normal. It's equivalent to cutting down all your building except, a skyscraper, 19-story skyscraper. Cut down the whole building except for 2 floors. of a 19-story skyscraper apartment building, and then have a projector with a big screen and point it and say that the apartments above it are still there. Now, for Reactor 4, when you look at these pictures, there's not an academic on the planet, including degenerate Veritasium. And the stuff I'm going to show you about him is just surreal that somebody could be that evil. He's got that, he's got, I think it's 19 million, 18 million subscribers. Evil pays, but I'll show you coming up in a few moments, actually. So the fuel pools reactor cores at the top of the building. It wasn't a scientist on the planet. And you'll never see 4 pictures of Fukushima, the 4 sides of it anywhere else. That's something you're never going to see. You'll never see the remains in a single picture anywhere else on this planet. I created that 13 years ago or something. So that's the official picture of Reactor 4, and that's the official picture of the fuel pool, which should be 100 feet above the stump there. Where's the Veritasium should do us a video and explain to us how that actually works. That'd be pretty cool. That story gets a little stranger though. So the fuel pool story goes way back. This is a fake picture. See these 3 people on their knees? Now look at the steel plates they're on and everything else. That's what the site would look like. But you got to remember that that piece was at the top of the destroyed building. So it's so radioactive, you could never get near it in the first place. It weighs over 100,000 pounds. And there's nothing to be gained by looking underneath it. It's on steel plates. So even if it was real, which is not, and you can tell because this shadow and the second guy from the left, shadows are different. So you know that's green screen, right? Why is this guy back here? Just give me a minute. I just, I got the show ready, packaged, good to go. And these things bother me though. These are things that really bother me. And then it's best if I talk it out because otherwise it'll bother me. And it's important stuff. It's stuff that's undeniable. Okay, the problem with this story is such a difficult story. You don't have the latitude of making a mistake when you're telling the story because the story is so important. Here we go. We're almost to where I need to be. I went past it. That's pretty normal for Dana. I needed a picture of Reactor 4 of that on top of the building. So I forgot to preload that because it's an overwhelming amount. If I sat here all day, you'll never stop adding on to the story, right, to try to make the story more understandable for everybody. And of course, whichever picture I want, it's always in my way when I really need it, though. You can't find it. Here we go. I got a couple of versions of it. So that container there, that's not a very good picture. Let me see if I can find one more. So this was still in the building, but so they had taken the fuel out of the reactor core, and 1/3 of the reactor core, and they put it in the fuel, which had at least 8 reactor cores. You could have had twice that, because the average each year. Here we go. That's a great picture, actually. The industry is crazy, to say the least. So there's that yellow contraption. That's the cover for the reactor, by the way. Contraption is not the right word. Now that's supposed to be at the top of the building, a 190-foot building. So it should be up around 150 feet. And that gets taken off when you're changing fuel. So because this melted down, and you can pretend it didn't, but it actually melted down, Lost 8 fuel pools, 8 reactor cores in the fuel pool, or probably more. And because you only take out 1/3 of the reactor core when they're doing the maintenance, which is a huge maintenance, to do like 11,000 different maintenances, and you bring in 1,000 plus transient workers, because you don't want the statistics of diseases and cancers to start adding up on the fuel cycle correlations. So they bring in these external people to do the work. And so right alongside it on one side is the reactor core. Just let me walk you through it, actually. Because it makes more sense if it does that. Yank, yank, yank. So that's the bottom, that's the top. If I slow down a bit, that's the top over there. And then that's the cover. That's the reactor cores. And so they're supposed to be 100 and plus feet above it, right? So let's come over to this video picture for a second. So if you look at this guy right here, like none of this, you can't be near it. You can't get that close to it, first off, because it's at a nuclear meltdown. You had lost 8 reactor cores, so it's lethal doses. If you chop out a square foot of that, most likely, and put it in the wall at a subway, everybody walks past it for 1,000,000 years will drop dead because of the radiation. So there's zero possibility you stood up alongside of it. Zero. Right? It was already removed right before it exploded. But clearly, and they officially, this never happened. But that's the official picture, but officially that never happened. Officially, at the top of the building that doesn't exist, it looks like this. But I wanted to bring you the full picture. Okay, so they come out with this story, the installation of steel support pillars under the fuel pool for reactor 4 fuel pools. And this was a picture that they put out. This was part of a story. These are pillars to hold the fuel pool because the fuel pool got damaged, they said, in the explosion. So the explosion, they basically show you the furthest picture to your left and the bottom. And they're telling you that it was the roof blown off the building. There was some structural damage, but everything, the containment and everything stayed intact. Right? You know, it's simply not true. And you know that because when you look at this picture here, in 2012, you know there's no fuel pool. There isn't, because it's at the top of this 190. It's supposed to be 190 foot, 16 or 65 meter, 19-story building. Okay, and it can't look like that. And so that hole you see over there, that's the shaft for lowering down the 50-ton cast full of fuel when they're transferring it out of there 20, 30 years later to the common spent fuel pool or the cast storage. And that's some of the pictures that they release. Reactor building unit 4, Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station, installation of support pillars. And this is TEPCO's website and the International Atomic Energy Agency. They link to this link, rather. Installation of support pillars at the bottom of the spent fuel pool. So and they show you the diagrams over there, right? And I'll just... let me just move that around a bit for you. So that's a fuel pool right here. And that's a fuel pool where that arrow is to. There's 2 fuel pools. And that top of that reactor yellow cap would have went right here. Remember, it's hard, because that don't look like a typical 19-story apartment building. Then it's confusing for people, but it's a 19-story. So that's not true. Okay, so that's not true. They're not there alongside of it because it's lethal doses, because it was sitting in it was covered in nuclear fuel for a long period of time. So there's zero possibility you're going to be stood there. But when you look at this shadow here and the shadow of the second guy to your left, right, they're close, but they're different. And shadows don't do that. Sunlight doesn't do that. And you see that stack over there, that vent stack for the fuel pool, which is spraying radiation all over your communities 24 hours a day. Because the fuel reactor cores that are in the fuel pools at the top of the buildings, right? They can't contain the radiation. They can contain the gamma shines and neutron bursts underwater, but you're releasing the isotopes because the fuel is still splitting atoms. So you're going to have to put 120,000 liters in those pools every day. So the building to your left is fake, right? These people are not at the top of the building, so that's fake. They're not putting these things under the fuel pool because it doesn't exist, right? The building doesn't exist. And Reactor 3, of course, doesn't look like that because it was completely destroyed and it had ejected the reactor core right out of the building. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Okay. So, Veritasium. Now, when he made this video we're going to talk about for a little time, but I'm going to do a whole presentation on it again because it was up on my other site with tens of thousands of views, but he took my site down when I was out looking for spiders because the spiders were missing, right? And so when I put out a video on the research expedition, spiders were missing from the forest, and that I had been talking to another researcher that came through on side-by-sides and quads, who happened to be researching spiders in Nova Scotia. They took down my site the next morning when I went to put an update on it, and it should have been 500,000 per acre. There was nothing in the forest. They can't tie onto the trees because of the pulse of radiation. I forgot what I was doing. Hang on. Okay, let's do it this way. Not that way, this way. Veritasium, Derek Alexander Muller. And that's his website back in the day. He's got 18 million now or something. That's him here. And he made this documentary with CNN, where he went in there. Here he is at Fukushima. The Tyvek suit, huh? We don't know if it's green screen. He probably went there. He's pretty stupid, and evil. That's what he done, and I'm going to show you, is unbelievably evil. So these communities at 7 billion atoms a kilogram, you got to multiply it by 66.6 to get a square meter where the children and the victims are to. 15 kilometers from Fukushima, most likely came from Reactor 3. Over 7,500 was plutonium americium. The biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod is curium, by the way. Not cesium, not iodine or anything else. But these are absurd numbers. These are numbers we've never heard tell of. There's no literature with these kind of numbers pre-Fukushima. So at one point there was, this is 2012, there was over 1,200 children had died. From nosebleeds, they were sick, nosebleeds, they didn't gain, they wouldn't gain a pound in a whole year. There was headaches, they were bleeding. But Derek from Veritasium claimed it was equal to this many bananas being in the nuclear wasteland. So he's mocking the victims, and it gets worse. Veritasium, and an element of truth. Yeah, he puts a little element of truth, and the rest is whatever makes him the most money because he's so evil. He actually thinks he's normal. I don't even know if he realizes how incredibly evil, because he can make money doing anything. He's got these degrees, he's a big shot YouTuber, and he had 12 million subscribers. He decided to go and do this CNN, and he got a big push after it. He made a fortune. He's multi-millionaire many times over. But he's evil. He's just another serial killer. He makes Ted Bundy look like a schoolyard bully. He's so evil. Let's go in there and claim, it's hard for me, and then claim that bananas are equal to microsieverts on top of that. We're going to do his whole video coming up I got everything already pre-done, and I'm waiting for some stuff to show up so I can bring in the alternate Dana and turn it into a bit of a circus. Japan's National Cancer Center, this is the first year. This is a couple of years before Derek Muller even went there. Patients wrote, there was 865,000 extra cancer patients in the first year, excess. But Derek Muller, Veritasium, claimed that it's equal to this many bananas. That's the dose. In other words, nobody got hit. So he mocked the victims. I think he should be working at Fukushima for the rest of his worthless life. Japan's National Cancer Center said the number of patients rose. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness. It's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. And so we're talking about everybody on this planet, because of Fukushima, are producing anthropogenic man-made radioactive stem cells and hormones for the rest of their lives. And for children and species, that's particularly devastating because, just during their most dangerous years where they're developing, right? You're using anthropogenic man-made isotopes instead of natural elements for your development, right? For your hormones, and for your stem cells, or forever, and then for the rest of your lives and everybody else's. This is why you're seeing all these diseases worldwide. But a guy who looks like a human, who was in a position to do something evil, decided to go ahead and do it, claimed that it's like bananas. You had 35.8% of the Fukushima children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters, which is the length, the size of a child's thyroid, which produces the hormones for every function and development of their bodies for the next 20 years. So to go in there and mock them so he can get a big fat paycheck, what does that tell us about him, right? What do we learn about Derek Muller, Veritasium? What does that tell us about this? It tells you, like if you were in a criminal court, the jury would look at him and say he's literally the evilest person they've ever heard of. To go into a nuclear wasteland, downplay every facet of it, put that out there and promote in these comment sections the most hideous comments downplaying Fukushima or nuclear. That's the ones he promoted. That's the ones that he responded to. That's the ones he put on a pedestal. So like there's no end to his actual evil. And that person should be held accountable. That person should be litigated for what he done there. And I would imagine eventually he's going to be litigated. He's going to be held to account. And that everything he has should be liquidated. He should be put in jail for the rest of his life. And everything he accumulated should be liquidated and given to the victims of Fukushima, because a monster like him has made this possible for them to be the victims. The reason they're victims is because people like Derek Muller went in and covered it up. He's got 20 plus million views on that video, that little shit, evil, insidious, monstrous little video. But when you got talking about 35.8%, you're talking about 13,646 of the 38,200. It used to be 1 in a million. So when you scale it up to 1 million, it's 365,000 or 358,000 out of 1 million. With thyroid tumors, at least the size of their thyroids, which is arguably the most important part of your body is the hormones, because they and your stem cells, because they dictate your future and your health and your genetics and everything else. And so evil, insidious, disgusting, and parasitic little monster, little sadistic demon, because he was in a position to do it, had a lot of subscribers, and he knew the industry would pump him out there. He went for it, and he didn't give a fuck about the victims. He didn't give 2 shits. He doesn't give 2 shits today or tomorrow. He never will. He doesn't care less. He cares because enough that he went in there and used them as a tool to further himself in arguably one of the most evil ways you can do. What he done was the lowest you can stoop to do to make a living. Go in and pretend that it never happened, and then to downplay it and pretend that it's the animosity equivalent to bananas. Let me explain the comparison of bananas, because that is shocking again. I'm going to give you the information because that's the better way to do it, right? To compare bananas to anthropogenic man-made radiation, back in those days was pretty common, but he took it to a different level, didn't he? By the way, natural radiation, like potassium, doesn't bioaccumulate in your body any more than what your body would use normally. You're already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. So when you talk about man-made radiation, not natural but man-made, you think of a Curie. Curie is 37 billion man-made isotopes, man-made atoms that are ionizing. And a single ionizing radiation, when it's in your body, is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second, destroying your chromosomes, your cells, your DNA. Your body tries to repair that every second with white blood cells. And it attacks the source every second for the rest of your life with white blood cells, which depletes your red blood cells, because for every white blood cell, you need a red blood cell. Okay. So potassium is 0.000071 curies per gram. And if you can have a ton of it in the back of your pickup truck, it can't hurt you. Your body can only absorb as much potassium as your body needs. Right? There's nothing on the planet, literally, that doesn't have potassium. Nothing visible anyway. Cesium-137, 88 curies per gram. So 88 times 37 billion would be a gram of man-made. And each atom can give a person a cancer or a disease or an illness or autoimmune deficiency trigger of heart, liver, lung, respiratory problems for the rest of their lives. So when he makes the comparison, that is like a banana, which is a banana basically 71 10 millionths of a curie, 71 10 millionths of a curie, where strontium is 140 times 37 billion atoms. So to make the comparison, even for a millisecond, but to do it in the context of making videos, getting 20 million views on it, and responding to the most insidious comments in the comment section, and actually removing anybody that was lucid, because people were responding to people, and he had removed those people from the comment section, is a whole different type of evil to go into a nuclear wasteland. Like, they didn't pick up 30 million one-ton bags of bananas. It was 100,000 man-made atoms minimum per kilogram of just gamma radiation was the target. And so, 30 million is 5 rows of traffic, one-ton pickup trucks with a one-ton bag in the back of it, wrapped around the entire planet. It's hard for me to reconcile as somebody who has everything already. He has everything. He had 12 million subscribers. He had a thriving site. He was making a fortune. Right? He's making a fortune. But he's so greedy that this insidious, creepy, disgusting, parasitic monster, this despicable example, this is literally a monster of something most people have never encountered, how monstrous this is. It worries me, because what else would he do if he had the chance? What is he capable? If he's capable of pretending that the victims don't matter and that only he matters. And that how can you not be sympathetic to these victims? How does that actually work as a human? How can a human be in a conversation? Now, if you were in a conversation with him, you didn't know anything about it, and you told him these statistics, he would say, that's terrible. He wouldn't brag that he'd done what he'd done, because he's really smart. He's like Ted Bundy. He's like 20 million Ted Bundys is what he's actually like. Truly one of the most evilest people I've ever come across. What he done and downplay the victims, to go in there and just mock them, is you're a different kind of monster. That's a different kind of monster. That's a monster we rarely see. And we in the nuclear, because we're looking at the nuclear industry, we see a lot of monsters. But he's a little extra special, this fucking piece of shit. Fuck you, Derek, you scumbag. Anyway, let's keep going here. To spent fuel danger in Japan and nuclear disaster, the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. Another bunch of scum degenerate monsters. Not as bad as Derek Muller from Veritasium, I can tell you that much, but they're not too far off. With news that a third reactor at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant exploded on Tuesday morning. They're talking about Reactor 4. Now, the fuel pool was at the top of Reactor 4, which is a 190 feet building. It's 19-story, 65-meter building. It's about 150 feet up. So do you think that's a 150-foot tall building? If not, then you got to assume. And you know what's interesting about this? Let me use the other one there because this side over here I got a tendency to zoom. But it also, because there's a pre-zoom into it that I'm not quite familiar with this system. I'll figure it out, I just haven't had the chance. So they built this contraption off-site and they assembled it with remote-controlled cranes, right? And when you see all of these cement trucks are there just to cover up radiation areas so that the homeless aren't dropping dead. It exploded. Now, we've, over the last number of years, it's very rare for anybody to say the word Fukushima Reactor 4 exploded. And early Tuesday morning, experts continued to debate the possible outcome of a core meltdown, the possible outcome. See, they refused to acknowledge. Just because they refused to acknowledge it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And because it actually did happen, the fuel pools were lost. We're looking at around 36 large reactor cores. So in comparison to Chernobyl, they're large. Chernobyl was a graphite, it was a new reactor, it was a small reactor. Fukushima's are large plutonium-uranium reactors. So they're about a 100-to-1 ratio for each reactor core. There was 9 reactor cores at the top of Reactor 4, which is equal to 900 Chernobyls because of the uranium-plutonium concentrations. Reactor 3 was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, so it was infinitely worse. Oh, my audio was off, was it? I'm sorry. That's my fault. I left the audio on. Sorry. There he goes. A leak. So this is one of the pictures. I see that's the reactor building. Look at the contraption they put over it. But you can see the cutout over there, which is almost ground level. Remember, they put the contraption over the top of that to hide it, and then they pretend that it looks like that on the inside. That's TEPCO's picture right here we're looking at. Leak of radioactive meltdown. And a leak. How can you have a leak from a nuclear meltdown? You can't. It's a massive release. It can't just, like the word leak doesn't work in that equation. A leak is something, like your radiator in your car is leaking, or something's leaking in your fridge, or it's got nothing to do with a big industrial event, and particularly when it comes to nuclear. Let me keep it going here. Possible outcome of a core meltdown, leak of radioactive material from any of the 3 reactors. So at this point, this was on the 15th or the 16th. Let me come back up here. Yeah, this is the 15th of March. So on the 15th of March, the reactors have all blown. You have 4 meltdowns in a row. Significant. Reactor 4 is completely destroyed. Reactor 3 is completely... Reactor 2 actually liquefied, and Reactor 1 immediately lost its fuel pool on the 12th, right? Possible outcome of a core meltdown and leak of radioactive materials from any of the 3 reactors. So even though the reactors blew up, and they have all, when you're looking at this and you're saying there's still no core meltdown, this is the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, right? Which is created by the Manhattan Project. And that the original footage, this is undeniable meltdowns to anybody with any nuclear knowledge. Right? They look at that and they say, well, the fuel pools are gone, the reactor cores are gone. But yet they refuse, not all of them, but recently, in the last decade, nobody's ever come out with any kind of suggestions that it did. But in the first couple of years, there was dissenting voices. And these stories, they infuriate me. It infuriates me that they done that. The cover story was right from day one on top of that. And the cover story was just, it's unbelievable how much work they went through. So let's talk about Reactor 4. Let me just grab a couple of those headlines maybe. Yeah, so here's a good one. Look, this is where they acknowledge something significant had happened. It was a very rare occasion, by the way. It was Daily Mail, March the 18th. Radiation is streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 boiled dry. And it boiled dry on the 15th. It melted down on the 15th and detonated. The picture to your left. Possible outcome of a core meltdown, leak of radioactive material. So why would you call it possible when it was unassailably, unquestionably a nuclear event? The fuel pools were gone. Chernobyl never had no fuel pools. Sellafield never had no fuel pools. And 3 Mile Island never had the fuel pools. In a larger discussion regarding the disaster among representatives from the watchdog group, Nuclear Watchdog, the Union of Concerned Scientists, we refuse to call them that. We call them the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. They're Derek Mullers with a degree, right? They're just heartless, disgusting maggots to humanity. They're the worst humans conceivable. Derek Muller has got 20 million subscribers, and his whole world is a fantasy. His friends and families don't know it, right? He needs to be confronted. He needs to be confronted with a bunch of video cameras, and people need to call these people out. Right? You should drag them into court and litigate them for making fake videos that harmed millions of children. For purposely destroying millions of children. That's what he done. Experts question whether spent fuel stored on site in the Japanese plant might also pose a threat. They refused to look at the buildings, and these were the experts from the Union of Concerned Scientists. Refusing, because they all seen these pictures, refusing to acknowledge, and they would have had access to more information, right? Refusing to acknowledge, these, you never see this picture anywhere else. These are the 4 sides of the reactor. Fuel pools and reactor cores at the top of the building. And Dirk Muller doesn't show you pictures of the reactors. He goes in and talks about bananas and smoking on top of that. Cigarettes. So you're trying to blame any sicknesses on smoking or drinking and radiophobias in a nuclear wasteland. I've seen a lot of scumbags in the nuclear industry over the years. I got to admit, he takes the cake. And there's some we've covered some pretty despicable monsters. What he done is exceptional. It shows you how dangerous he actually is. And so I wouldn't be surprised when he was young that there's a few tourists missing from Australia. He's a sick, twisted, demented monster to do what he done. There's nothing that person wouldn't do if he thought he can get away with it. There's nothing. I can tell you one thing, he is a coward. Why is it people like that are always cowards? They're always the chicken necks of your communities. Why is it that way, though, right? Why don't people recognize them and put them in mental institutions when they're young and get rid of them? Experts. So if the experts can't look at these buildings, then that's not and say that the fuel pools are gone. That's not an expert, or it's an expert with an agenda to destroy your ability to have a future. That's what Dirk Muller, Veritasium, done. He destroyed people who were stupid enough or complacent enough to watch his video, ability to even have a future. Whether the spent fuel stored on site in Japan's plants might also pose a threat. How, like Mike also posed the Union of Concerned Experts. So how can you look at that and not on the 15th, on the 13th, and not know that when he showed the video, that was showed worldwide. You've seen the fuel pools and the reactor cores ejected right out of the buildings. I'll play it for you. I'll play it because I'm a crazy kind of a guy. I'm offended that people like that are allowed to exist and prosper on top of that. He should be sterilized so he can't have children. This is Reactor 3 explosion, slow motion. And you're going to see great big stuff. Remember, these buildings are 150 feet. How big are those chunks? That's the fuel pool in the reactor cores falling back down. And we know that because we have what's left of the building that day. So the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, if you look at their board, right, the amount of people that are cheering, the secretaries, and everybody else, this is a big operation, hundreds of people. They have an enormous amount of money from a bunch of foundations that they didn't create these foundations so that the industry could be evil. The industry took those foundations over. That's one of the problems with starting up a foundation. If it prospers and then eventually they'll chase you out there. They'll chase you out of it. That's what they've done with Greenpeace, for instance, right? To get control of it. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Though hard to determine the danger in Japan. Why would it be hard to determine the danger in Japan when you knew that you had multiple reactors and fuel pools detonate? They had made 5,500 Speedy models, which is a model based on wind patterns and radioactive fallout. In just the first month, for instance. But they had made a lot that first day, second day, third day, fourth day. In the Mark I reactors, such as the Fukushima Daiichi plants, spent fuel is located in the cooling pools in the reactor's attic, the top of the buildings. David Lockbrum, director of the Union of Unconcerned Scientists Nuclear Safety Program. The director, so they have a director, they have all kinds of other people, general secretaries of the Nuclear Safety Program. And here they are on day 5, lying through their teeth that this never happened, that no worry about the fuel, no worry about... For exploding units which have blown off the roofs and the walls, it's not the roof and the walls, these are total ejections of the materials. the burning of the fuel pools, which is decades of reactor cores. If there's any radiation releases, so why would you say if there's any radiation releases when he's seen that? Like, how evil do you got to be these people? This is evil. They have no rights to be among us. They should be in jail for the rest of their lives. These are clearly monsters. These are insidious monsters like Muller from Veritasium. What he done, what I showed you earlier, that's a monster. That's a vicious, hateful, disgusting, parasitic monster. That's a serial killer of proportions most people can't even comprehend. To go in there and actually do stuff like that. To commit himself for all that time, because he went all around the world visiting these places, and he compared every one of them to bananas. The harmful effects. Like, it's evil beyond any concept. And in order to have a personality to do something like that, you are a sick, twisted individual. Anybody who takes that job and then promotes it and gets in the comments section and promotes the worst comments, the most hideous, outrageous lies, that's not normal. I don't know. Like, he probably went to school to get a job just to do this. Like a lot of those people that work in that position, that's what they done. They knew about the industry. They knew you get big money for an apologist for the industries. And clearly that's what Derek's site was all about. He already had 12 million subscribers. He was going to make lots of money. He didn't need to do what he's doing. He done it because it's more evil than anything else he ever done before, see? And he's done some evil stuff. If there's any radiation release, it's going to get to the environment. He compares the scenario of radiation release from the fuel in the core protected by the containment would reduce the amount of radioactivity that reached the public. Well, everything was ejected right out of the buildings, for instance, of Reactor 3. But he is the director of the Union of Concerned Scientists Nuclear Safety Program, the Nuclear Watchdog, and blatant, outrageous, perpetual lies. And there's lots of them. Chaim Braun, a consulting professor at the Stanford Center for International Security Cooperation, Stanford University, notes that though the spent fuel pool are in fact exposed in the top of the reactor buildings, exposed and rejected right out of the buildings. Reactor 1 cooked right off. Reactor 2 liquefied and burnt for days before it went deep in the earth. Reactor 3 ejected it right out of the building, and Reactor 4 lost its entire inventories on the 15th, everything. You're talking about 36 massive reactor cores of pure uranium plutonium lost. He refused, no longer has a roof, so suggesting that the roofs are gone when the buildings are actually completely annihilated. They're designed to take the explosion on top of that. They're actually mitigated to take it so they can come out with a cover story. That's part of the engineering. Besides the fact that almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms right up to the property lines. When you look at all four sides of the building in hindsight, and you realize that people don't need all four sides in the industry, they just need to see something like that or something like this or something like that to quantify the loss of the inventories. So for the tanks, let me talk about that for 1 second. There's 1,000 tanks on the site. Let's just jump for 1 minute. Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC in 2013 came out with a video. I better put my headphones on because we went silent there for a minute or something. My apologies.
Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We
understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
So, there's TEPCO telling you they have no control over the water in 2013, up to 2013. You have the BBC telling you and showing you that there is no fence, by the way, that the tanks were all full. From the aquifers under the site radiation. So the 1,000 tanks they built them all in 2013. Most of them are bolted together. You're talking about multiple sieverts per liter. There's zero possibility you're putting that in those tanks. You won't be able to get back on the site, see? People will be dropping dead before they can get to the tank to fix it. And how are you going to fix it when you're getting 1 million sievers coming out of those tanks? And you don't talk about it, then there will never be any kind of conversation. The key is the water levels in these pools. They were ejected right out of the buildings. They were cooked right off. The evidence of all the reactors on the 15th of March 2011 are overwhelming. The pools must continuously have water pumped into them. Reactor 1 has no pools. They lost their pools on the 12th. If the level goes down, he says the gamma radiation from the fission products contained in the fuel is not attenuated by water cover and might escape into the atmosphere. The water doesn't stop the radiation per se from getting out. They're always splitting atoms, first off. All the fuel is still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. That's released constantly up the tall, skinny vent stacks, the big tall stacks. And that's why most of them are surrounded by fuel. You're talking about massive plumes every day coming out of the fuel pools. From 1,000 fuel pools are releasing 1,000 plumes every day, 24 hours. Once the water heats up, the fuel, before it even gets into the so-called catching fire and melting down version, it can lose its integrity, and the radiation, not just cesium, not just gamma. It's absurd to use the word gamma in this context right here. He notes that these pools usually need about 5 meters of water levels above the spent fuel to block the radiation, 15 feet of water to stop the gamma shine from the people up that's working in the building. It's always releasing radiation. Never forget that part. Oh, okay. What the hell is that? Okay, a bit of a problem here. What the hell? Let's keep going. changed it. Sweep in or sweep out. There we go. Man, that's fast, eh? Let me slow that down a bit. Can't slow it down that much. That's a bit better. He noted these pools usually need 5 meters of water, and water needs to circulate. Well, first off, there's no fuel pools at the top of reactor 4. Right? They put that contraption over, it doesn't physically touch it, so they can pretend that they got all the fuel at the pool. Clearly, they didn't. And the reason they're doing this is because they don't want to be blamed for an extinction event on planet Earth. That's why they're doing it that way, right? Pools usually need about 5 meters of water levels above the spent fuel to block the radiation from reaching the atmosphere. It doesn't work that way. First off, the fuel, each fuel pool needs 6,450,000 one-ton trucks, say, for instance, of water a minute. That's the best way to think of it. That's how much water. If you put a one-ton truck bumper to bumper right around the entire planet, that's around 6 million. So it's over 25,000 miles of one-ton pickup trucks with 2 tons of water, 1,000 liters in the back of each truck in 24 hours. That's what a reactor needs. That's what it's going to go through. And each glass of water, salt water, would have 1 billion creatures. So you can do the math on that. You can see how insane these disease factors actually are. So you're going to destroy, every glass of water is 1 billion creatures. And 75 to 100 million are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. Reactor 3 doesn't exist, period. We know Reactor 1 is gone. We know Reactor 2 was gone. Reactor 3 is gone. Reactor 4 is gone when they wrote that story. And they're the watchdogs. So the cover story in the first week was already established. That should terrify you, that they think that way, act that way. And because this had a lot of attention because of the tsunami, who knows if this has already happened and they managed to successfully cover it up and we don't even know about it. Because if they're capable of doing what they've done there with so much public attention, what are they capable of doing without that attention, right? If the water level in the pool recedes down to the point where the spent fuel assemblies are partially exposed, well, you can't partially expose them. First off, the minute that you expose it, it'll catch fire and burn at 1800 degrees, the zirconium claddings of the fuel rods. That'll ignite the plutonium-uranium pellets. They'll burn at 9,000. And you don't need oxygen, so they'll burn underwater. That will light up the rest of the fuel. Right? It doesn't need to be exposed to light up, per se, right? Well, you know, you get once the fire started, it'll burn underwater. It doesn't need oxygen. Well, it burns in water anyway, right? But this is a runaway we're talking about. If the water level in the pool reaches to the point where the spent fuel assemblies are partially exposed, partial melting of the spent fuel might occur, thus releasing partial melting. It doesn't work that way either, right? Because the enormous temperatures we're talking about, you'll flash boil the water in the pool, everything's exposed to oxygen, it'll catch fire, because that's what zirconium does. That's the physics. Some of the fission products from the spent fuel into the external environment. Do you like my poll tonight? Should professors who teach nuclear to run through Fukushima Reactor 3 meltdowns in a paper suit? Yeah, so should professors that teach nuclear have to run through that building in a paper suit? Why not, right? Some of the fission products in the spent fuel to the external environment. Really? So these explosions are not releasing the inventories into the environment, are they? the buildings are completely destroyed. Like, it's hard for me to reconcile the people, and that the industry in total, and the journalists and the universities all had to participate in the law worldwide for that law to work. Right? The only way the law works is if everybody tells the law. And that's why Derek Muller, right? He's the type of guy who will come in later because everybody already told lies. He's going to go, like, I'm going to get my chunk of the pie. Because he's so evil, he doesn't understand. He does actually understand. He's very smart. He's very smart, right? That's the whole thing about these people. Incredible degrees and pedigrees. They grew up very privileged. And they're bored with life. They had everything as a kid given to them, just handed to them on a silver platter. Their education, everything's handed to them. Their health care, their dental, everything's handed to them their whole life. And being evil is just part of life. That's what their friends and families and loved ones done their whole lives. But that's why we can't have a future, and that's why we're not going to have a future, is because people like that exist. They're the epitome of why all the species are now gone. We never tried to come up with solutions because these people in key positions decided to cut everybody's throats so they can benefit from it. They don't care about Earth, they don't care about the species, they don't care about anybody. They don't care about themselves, so they wouldn't have done what they've done on top of that. Because they don't get to enjoy the future they would have had if they took another path. For the Union of Concerned, they're going to name now Union of Concerned Scientists. So if you're just the average homeowner, business employee, worker, whatever, owners, then you see the Union of Concerned Scientists. You say, well, these are these are people with a moral compass, Dana. And typically, you can't argue with someone like that. Now, if you come and watch the documentation, the evidence you support, then they'll get it right quick, and they might even have a eureka moment and join the rest of humanity and fight for some kind of a future. Derek Muller will get a group and try to oppose you. Because to spend fuel radiation, he'll be very funded and very organized. Because to spend fuel radiation heats the water surrounding it. Constant circulation, talk about the fuel pool, the reactor cores that are in the fuel pool are very hot. They're hot because they're splitting atoms. The hotter they are, the more atoms they're splitting. And these are lethal atoms, there's no containment. They're vented up to stacks into your biosphere and atmosphere, into your waterways. And they're burned. They have incinerators on the site where they burn this stuff legally, and they have huge networks of pipes going into the ocean where they're legally allowed to dump radiation. And they just change the laws in increments over years through constitutional lawyers. Because you have corporate personhood, they can hide away behind that. And you can't hold them accountable, you can only give them a fine. We can't have a future with these people running amok, being monsters into humanity, which we can't have a future. We got 46 million migratory birds missing where I'm to post-Fukushima. And so when they would come here and they would lay and raise their fledglings, lay their eggs and raise their fledglings, the biggest run of seabirds on the planet, they would come here and raise their fledglings, then they would, when they leave here, you're talking about 250 million birds flying out of here. Migratory birds, right? All the whales are emaciated. And he's Canada, United States, Derek Muller of Veritasium. Australia, of course, 3/4 or more of the Great Barrier Reef has died post-Fukushima. Most of the migratory species that goes there have died. And the rest are emaciated, running themselves up on the rocks from starvation. But these people that profit off this kind of stuff, there has to be a moment where they're going to be held accountable. You can't let these people get away with this. They have to be litigated. Tokyo Electric Power Company, and he'll plead that he cared, but he was forced to do it or something, right? They're cowards. They're the first thing from a human you're going to come across. Tokyo Electric Power Company continues to monitor the temperature in these spent fuel pools. Well, they can't continue to monitor the temperature of something that doesn't exist. And so the people that are telling these stories from the Union of Unconcerned Scientists, they'll keep advancing. He probably works for the International Atomic Energy Agency now or something like that, or Nuclear Regulatory Commission now, see? He covered up this act, he covered up that. We can count on that guy, right? He'll destroy a country for us just to keep his shit fucking job. In new news now, a new micro fusion reactor can power butt plugs for about 30 years without having to turn it off. So people like Derek Muller now are quite happy. He's going to buy a whole bunch of them, apparently, just in case. When you look at Reactor 3, the building doesn't exist, right? So they put this contraption around the stump and over the stump. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. My only problem is I give a shit. And so I can't pretend that it's not happening, like that it doesn't have any adverse side effects. I can't do that. I'm not evil like Derek. I'm not evil like these people, right? So let me do this for 1 second. Well, that's reactor 3. So there's a reactor 4 to your left, reactor 3 behind me. But just hang on, I'll grab a picture that I wanted to show you of what's left of reactor 3. So there can be no mistake in what you're looking at. There we go. I don't see why they should be allowed to get away with this. Okay, here we go. So they put a contraption over this stump, and that's what it looks like. They built these contraptions around it. It doesn't physically touch it, right? Because there's nothing left. It can't sustain any weight, whatever's left. But as they were building it, there was a picture, a high quality, showed up in the Japanese media of the site, and so I was grabbing every picture. I was grabbing every picture that came out for years and years and years. That's not the one. Yeah, this is the picture, but it's not the high quality, I don't think. I just got to flush out the file a bit better. Here, let me show you what I mean. So reactor 3, this was the only picture, and this is how I ended up with these pictures that I show you. I was able to zoom in on the reactors. So this is not the high quality one. I got it there. I found it again the week in the original one. But I was able to zoom in and extrapolate these types of pictures. You can see it's not very high quality, obviously, right? But maybe I'll find it in a minute. And then the same thing for reactor 4. And look at the debris over here, for instance, right? But yet inside of reactor 3, it's supposed to be perfect. And reactor 4. And you can't have a destroyed building and then be perfect. It can't be like we don't have an invisible cloak, right? They can't be 100 feet above the stump to your left. It just doesn't work that way. So that's, you're looking into reactor 3 that doesn't exist. And this is reactor 2. And then they have this contraption put there. That's meant to block the hole that was created when there was a couple explosions in the building. And that's put in there by a crane. Humans can't survive in that environment. Your organs melt right away. And reactor 1, right? It's gone. Everything is gone from these buildings. So, like, the top of this reactor is right here. But that's the top of the reactor. So here's the ground, steel plates, cement underneath that and pavement. And here's the top of the reactor. So this is not a 190-foot building or anywhere close to it. And so they put this contraption up and then over it. They put these, this is 2 panels. This is put there by cranes. If you're stood up there in a paper suit, it's because you don't know nothing about nuclear. You're most likely homeless or destitute, like this guy's. And this is Photoshop. You're not coming out of reactor 4. You're not up there waltzing around, having a little gander at reactor 4. It doesn't work that way. It's nuclear meltdowns. You have 9 reactor cores melted down at each of these sites, right? These buildings don't physically touch each other, right? It's a cantilever over it. So professors who teach nuclear have to run through Fukushima Reactor 3 meltdown in a paper suit. So here's another fake picture. This is crazy that they do stuff like this. And this is the strangest picture I've ever seen, man. And I didn't see this used only one place. If this was a handout, you would have seen it show up everywhere, right? They're just walking around, la-da-da-da-da, it's nuclear meltdown, have a nice day, got my paper suit on, blah, 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 blah. I'm better than everybody. I'm like Robert Muller from Veritasium. I'm good, everybody else is scumbags. I get a kick out of that guy over there in the sunlight, so-called sunlight stood up. This guy right here, he just stood up there. The other guys were walking around with their box of, Beto box of rice and fish. And then look at the rubber boots, the boots they got on. You can't really see them in this one. I have to use this one. You got to cut off boots. There's no logical reason for them to be there in a paper suit at a nuclear meltdown. And their Tyvek or paper suits. Now, TEPCO said they burned 7,000 paper suits a day in their incinerators because there was allegedly 7,000 people on this site. And nobody bothered trying to explain what 7,000 people are going to do at a nuclear meltdown when it'll melt your organs in a few minutes. So what are you going to actually do there, see? We know at least at one point they acknowledged around 800 homeless people were incinerated who died at this site. But as far as I can tell, this is a fake picture too. It's meant to reinforce that it's somehow magically, they're at the top of the building, they're getting all the fuel out of the pool, right? This is another interesting one. That's Reactor 4. And he's supposed to be with a sample of water that's filtered in the ELP system. The ELP system, like the Arriva system, the French government system, and the Siri system, the Curie system, for water filtration, can't work. They can't work. Because you're talking about fuel particulates. You can't filter fuel particulates because the filter will have a meltdown right away. You get gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas going off at one time. You're going to have a meltdown. Right? And, Enrico Fermi's discovery of it is just moving the materials in proximity to each other. That's how we done the chain reaction, the first chain reaction, right? In Chicago. And it's the same thing in the filter. You're talking about thousands of sieverts of this stuff, of fuel particles that are splitting atoms in your filter in 20 minutes. So you can never change the filter. You can't get back in the building to change the filter on top of that. Can't get near the pipes that are carrying this stuff. And not only that, the pumps are not going to work with that kind of stuff going through the system. The pumps will break down right away. The electronics and everything can't handle this. It's all going directly into the ocean. And this is when they were originally trying to promote, they were trying to come up with a cover story, not trying, but they had already structured a cover-up of the water. Right, the tanks were the original cover-up, where they tried to come up with a better story, and then they had to come up with a reason to get rid of the tanks, because they couldn't keep getting people to lie for them. People were asking questions, right? And they were saying, well, the tanks are really dangerous, but there was no evidence of this. People were figuring things out. So this was an interesting angle. I don't know if we've ever seen this angle before, have we? That's reactor 4. So inside that top of that building, it looks like this, Dana. Okay, all right. But outside looks like this. So when you look at all the debris on the ground, where did that come from? Or you see all this debris, all the stuff on the roof that was belonging on the roof, and all the stuff in the background. And look how raggedy the building actually is, that they got this contraption put over. And up there, in the middle of nowhere, where before it was empty, is now magically everything is perfect. It's a normal functioning Mach 1 reactor. It simply doesn't work that way. And so all this debris is the actual fuel pools and structure of the buildings. Right, the building actually looks like this. There is no building. They put the contraption over it to hide it. Doesn't physically touch it. It's still destroyed inside. Once you go in that, if you could go in the building, this is what you're going to see. It'll always be that way. It'll never change. And then they pretend they're on top of it, just like they done at Reactor 4. And many of them done it. Designs such as the Mark III reactors, which stores their spent fuel pools at ground level, might be less vulnerable. If something were to happen and one of our pools released radioactive contents into the air, there'd be a lot of people in harm's way. And it would be a shame for us allowing that to happen. Who lied during the whole story? So this is only on day 5, is it? Yeah, no, this was day 4. Another large quake rattles Tokyo. A 6.0 magnitude earthquake struck Tuesday night, but no new damage was reported. So what was it? I can't remember how many aftershocks. There was something incredible. There have been hundreds of aftershocks following. This is the 15th of March, day 4. And up to day 4, there was hundreds of massive aftershocks. 45 of the aftershocks were massive earthquakes of magnitude 6.0. But Japan uses a scale of 1 to 7, right, the Shindu scale. So their scale, you got to multiply 1.428 to get the international scale. So whenever they use magnitude, they're supposed to be alluding to the international scale, but we've caught them many times doing it, like Shika and Akito Islands earthquakes, where it's simply masquerading it, right? Even on their Wikipedia, it eventually came clean. Fire and steam at Japan's damaged nuclear plant spreads radiation worries. Now, this media we've covered quite a bit this week, and so some of the stories are very similar. Japanese officials worry about a new fire and possible cracks in 2 nuclear reactors. possible cracks. Well, you have reactor 4 in that picture, reactor 3, reactor 2, and reactor 1. All of them clearly melted down on the 15th. This story is on the 15th. And so everything is clearly melted down on the 15th. To call these people insane still doesn't do it justice, eh? What they've done is you don't have a right to destroy the planet. You don't have a right to lie about it, and you don't have a right to destroy our ability to have a future. You don't have that right. And what you've done is so evil to cover up what happened at Fukushima, because Fukushima was such a big event, it affected the entire planet. It wiped out the majority of the species in the first decade. Like the migratory animals and stuff like that. This is the French government's study, not a model, but an actual study of a spike of 1 million to 10 million atoms of just cesium-137 acknowledgement, which pulses energy 600 feet, by the way, every second, covering the entire planet in less than 23 days. This is based on a spike of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air in Canada, United States. And then the model then covered the whole planet in 23 days in those types of numbers. My goodness, right? Day 6 of the Japan's nuclear emergency brought few signs of relief to the troubled nation. People woke up Wednesday morning to the news that there had been a second fire in the number 4 building. Look at the number 4 is the furthest one over. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll zoom in on it. I gotta fix my zoomy thingies. So let me try something for a second. So let's call that one to the left. This one is a little far to the right. That's probably zoomed in a bit too much. We'll go zoom in like this. Right there, a little bit. Call that the next one. All right. So let me set that up, see how that plays out. Let's go to the number 4 reactor over there. The auto zoom now. Reactor 3 is completely gone. Reactor 4 completely gone. My apologies. Fluctuating radiation levels made it difficult for workers to combat the problem. Fluctuating radiation levels, like there's no way to survive there. You can't go there. You don't see any fire trucks there. You don't see the military tanks, or you don't see bulldozers. You're not seeing nothing there because you can't survive. A human can't survive. Their organs melt. Fluctuating radiation levels at the nuclear plant made it difficult for workers. And so telling these lies have compromised the future of every species and humanity as a whole. The existence of humanity, the ability of Earth to produce and sustain life now is significantly compromised, and we're on a downward spiral. But all of these reports, they actually knew the buildings were gone, the fuel pools were gone. They were in the position making a ton of money just talking about nuclear. And then the accident happened, and they came out immediately and told you nothing got out. Everything was mitigated, it was under control, etc., etc., etc. Like Derek Muller, going there and equating it with bananas is a different level of nuts. Is bananas. The blaze broke out, like they show you these trucks, right? They show you all the equipment and vehicles. They don't show you people. There is homeless people that work there. I have no doubt about that. This was built off-site and then reassembled with cranes. But there are humans there, right? And so a lot of people died to create this bizarre structure, which was meant to lull you into complacency. But when you look in the building, there's nothing left there. TEPCO reported no flames could be seen 30 minutes after the fire was initially sighted. And they had to look past number 3 to see reactor 4, so there's number 3. Clearly nothing happened to that. I think people like this should be held accountable immediately. And I think they should get the death penalty for what they've done. I think it should be a public execution. And I think that all of their assets should be liquidated and given to the victims. And I think you can't have a future unless you do that. And I think that's the way we're going to end up at some point. Because they never left us any other choices. Because they kept people deliberately incompetent when it comes to the nuclear equation. And then they surrounded themselves with securities. Like the La Hague in France has 500 security guards. It's a reprocessing site for fuel. Not because they're worried about somebody coming in and stealing something. That's not going to happen. Because you'll melt their organs. You won't be able to do it. But because to keep you away with Geiger counters, keep you away with cameras, keep you away from asking questions, right, as a deterrent and then as an illusion. So reactor 4, there's 0 academic scientists on the planet who looked at it and didn't know that the fuel pool's reactor cores, which you're talking about 9 reactor cores in a building are gone, and each reactor core is equal to probably 100 Chernobyls because of their uranium-plutonium concentrations. Number 4 was shut down at the time of the earthquake for inspections and maintenance. Well, maintenance means you take out 1/3 of the reactor core, so 2/3 of the reactor core was still in the reactor. That's the standard. That's what maintenance is. And that was lost. And so all the inventory was lost. And when you look at the buildings, you don't need to be an engineer, an architect, to appreciate the building is completely beyond any kind of... And because it's nuclear, it has a whole lot of other attributes that are frightening. But when you see all of this this is just a fraction of them, claiming they're at the building, claiming they're on top of the building, claiming everything is perfect, claiming they recovered all the fuel. Why would you do that? Why would you put the biggest medias on the planet, arguably? Well, ABC Australia, PIB is the biggest in Australia. CBS is the biggest in the United States. BBC is the biggest in United Kingdom and Europe. And CNN is found its way right around the entire planet. Very recognized media, right? So all of them are pretending that they're at the top of a building that doesn't even exist. TV footage of the damage caused yesterday showed 2 huge holes in the walls. Can you see holes in the walls? Anybody see holes in the walls? And so what's the point of media when their job clearly is to cut everybody's throat and destroy your ability to have a future? What's that point again? I don't understand. What's to be accomplished by doing that? Yeah. Should professors who teach nuclear have to run through the Fukushima Reactor 3 meltdown in paper suits? Yeah, that's the poll tonight. as well as sustainable damage to the roof. Substantial damage to the roof. Did you think are you worried about the roof, or are you worried about the reactor core and the fuel pools in that picture? You'll never see these 4 pictures anywhere else on the planet. And put together like this, and a depiction of the reactor. You're never going to see that anywhere on the planet. That is more terrifying to me than a whole lot of other things that terrifies people. With circulation in the storage pool halted, so suggesting the storage pool is, by proxy now you assume the storage pool is still intact, the radioactivity in the spent fuel would have raised the temperature of the water. This would have caused water to evaporate, eventually exposing the spent fuel rods to the air. Well, the zirconium cladding, the zirconium used for the cladding is the same zirconium they used to use in the early 1900s on the big cameras, and they had a mechanical button, and that would come up and break the glass on the flash. And the flash was a little container of zirconium. And so when you broke the glass, the oxygen rushed in, the zirconium flashed, like gunpowder flashes, right? If you like gunpowder, it's a bigger flash actually. But it's the same kind of thing where it all just goes crazy right away. So that's why I wouldn't buy antiques, right? Because of the radium they used back in the day is polished for some reason, the lunatics. The entire history of the nuclear industry is insane. I mean, they had radium suppositories. I mean, how can you can actually get evil in that, because they had radium lipstick and radium makeup for children and for women. They were targeting children specifically. They had radium polish. They had radium toothpaste, radium soap, radium shaving cream, radium razors, imbued with radium. But the radium polish it wasn't just polish. It was meant as a disinfectant, meant as a bug spray. So if you had bugs, you go around spraying the radium to kill the bug. You kill the bugs. So they wanted you to spray it on your bed to get rid of bed bugs, but now your bed is a radioactive nightmare. They've done it on purpose. And they know that, the furniture could last 100 years. It'll be radioactive for 5,500. And so people who buy antiques and brings it home are not going to find it with your typical Geiger counter that's only looking at cesium, basically, right? Being a monster is easy. Being a good person is easier, if you ask me. But apparently being a monster is easier. So this is, again, this doesn't make any sense, this picture. Nothing makes sense. Like, you're standing alongside of that, but like, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you looking for? Like, it doesn't have any context of reality. You're talking about 114,000 pounds. You can't get near it because it was in the nuclear meltdown itself for so long. So you physically can't go near this. You're not going to put a rope on it and move it somewhere. Why would you have a rope with tension on it? Doesn't make any sense. And what are you looking at? And why are the shadows pointed a different way? Some experts surmise that the water levels in the storage pool dropped. This is day 6, apparently. So why would you say the water level dropped when the fuel pools are obviously gone? To give you the illusions that they exist, right? March the 16th. After circulation failed. Well, the reactor needs 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water each day, 4,500 tons, one-ton pickup trucks. Think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks each minute going past your house in the morning, and your car is parked on the other side of the road, or your kid's school bus, or whatever. And a 70 one-ton pickup trucks going past right in front of you every second with 1,000 liters, 1 ton of water in the back of it. So every minute you need 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks of water to go into a reactor so he can do his thing. Stay cool and boil water and everything else. What you're talking about is you need 2 gas, oil, or coal plants because it runs on external power to produce enough energy to run that site. But you're talking about 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks in 24 hours, like a row of traffic around the entire planet, bumper to bumper, 1-ton trucks with 1,000 liters in the back of each of them. That's the equivalent of what we're talking about. Has to get into that reactor in 24 hours. Every 24 hours. For each reactor, not all reactors, but each reactor. Per reactor. So it's an enormous amount of energy to pull that stunt off, see? They're dependent on 2 external gas, oil, and coal plants. If you just use gas, say if you use 2 coal plants or an oil and gas plant or whatever, you're going to produce as much electricity as a nuclear site without the nuclear. Why would you waste all that energy? Because it's about the fuel cycle. They ship a lot of fuel to France and United Kingdom so they can make weapons material from it. Due to the string of aftershocks that have followed, you had a tsunami run through the site. You had a tsunami run through the country. Let me picture it. So that came through at 400 miles per hour. You're talking about 1,200 kilometers of coastline. There's no telephone poles. There's no infrastructure. Everything is destroyed. Right? And so there is nothing functional. There's no electricity anywhere, let alone at Fukushima. Fukushima is dependent on external power. So there's no energy, there's no this, there's no that. And there's no integrity in the academic community. The academic community now is dead to us all. We have zero right to put any faith in any industry, any universities. For the industry to get away with the lies, every university and every media on the planet had to participate in the lie, and government department for the industries had to participate in the lies. And those examples, we have an unbelievable amount of that documentation, right? That if you're here regularly, then you can't refute my assertions because you know it's true, right? You're not that you can't, but there's no reason to try because you know what I'm saying is true. It's a fact. These are not conjectures. There's no opinions. Right? This is about reality. We buried the entire planet in radioactive fallout. And the industry has done an amazing amount of work to pretend and to blatant lie. This was a professor from the United Kingdom saying if you smoked 14 cigarettes, he was talking to the homeless that are working at Fukushima, and they were doing this presentation, press club in the United States in Washington, so you had all the major media sitting there, and he was saying, if you're working at Fukushima, it was equal to 14 cigarettes, not a day or a year, but in your lifetime. That's the same dose you're going to get. Or it's like kayaking for 15 minutes. If you're at the nuclear meltdown, it was equal to kayaking. Like, these are crazy stuff, but he's a guy who does transplants. So he radiates people until they're almost dead, and then he tries to stick another person's arm or leg on them, or a pig's eyes or heart, who knows. These are sadistic people. They're torturing humans with radiation. With circulation in the storage pool halted, the radioactivity in the spent fuel would have raised the temperature of the water. With circulation in the storage pool halted, you stripped 2,000 square miles, the size of Texas, out in the middle of the Pacific, was washed out to sea. 1,200 square kilometers of coastline, up to 10 kilometers inland in some places. With circulation in the storage pool halted, I can barely wrap my mind around that kind of evil. This would have caused the water to evaporate, exposing the fuel rod, which means they immediately catch fire. Regardless of whether water circulation stopped or water sloshed out, the exposure of the spent fuel likely started the fire. Duh. You need 6,450,000 tons of water a day to keep the reactors cool and for them to do their things. It's just, it's very disappointing that people like this actually exist. We give you the lowdown on how boiling water reactors work and how they fail. So we got to put our fate into people that perpetually lie. March the 16th, give you the lowdown on how the boiling water reactor works and show you these pictures of the buildings completely gone. And then tell you that everything is okay, they're still working on it. And there's so many of these people, you actually can't keep up with it. Explosions first occurred in the building in number 1 and number 3 in the days following the March 11 earthquake, the 12th and the 14th. Following the March 11 earthquake tsunami, troubling problems next arose in reactor building number 2 on the 14th, number 4 on the 15th. Fires at the building housing reactor number 4. It was shut down, absolutely, but that doesn't mean nothing. The reactor cores in the fuel pools will still melt down. It'll be just no different than a running reactor. They're already gone through a chain reaction. And I don't, unfortunately, have my computer plumbed in tonight, so we can't. James just posted a video. The next Fukushima rave. We can't enjoy that because I didn't get my shit together today. Just kidding you. I'm not plugged in because I had to reinstall everything on my external, and I thought I had lots of time, but it wasn't until just recently that computer became usable again. It seems stable now anyway, so tomorrow night we'll have that one back. So I had some of my gear show up for the alternate for the two Dana shows. I'm just waiting for another couple of pieces to show up. And we're going to start trying to do double Danas once a week or 4 times a week or something like that. Because I think there's a lot of potential in that one, right? Where you got 2 Danas sitting in the studio. And it's going to be pretty funny too. I've been working on it hard so that when I finally get the equipment, we can yuck it up a bit. But James got a new song out. I'm going to listen to it. You guys will have to go over to his website, and I can't even post a link because I'm not connected. Oh, I am actually. I can do it that way. I just can't go through the screen. Let me just pop the song up. I'll put that in the description. Now what? Another audio? Oh, it's not plumbed through. That's right. It's my fault. I can put the link in your description here in a minute to his new song. And the song we started off with tonight is from the same site. There we go. So that's to the song I normally would have played tonight, but unfortunately I don't get a chance. And so I'm going to end it with another song. Just give me a second here. Yeah, I really disrespect Derek Muller from Veritasium, as I showed you earlier. What a slimy human he must be. This is a great video, man. This is called The Scientists and Their Blob. And it's just a presentation of the video on top of that. But you can go listen to the song I just posted. I'm going to play this one for a closing song. And we'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. Hopefully it goes better than it did tonight. It's pretty rough for me tonight. I guess Sunday we'll get there. Oh, by the way, Shutter for James donated another $260. Man, that was perfect. Thank you. See everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. Such a great video. Enjoy. It's from James too, by the way. Take care.
Birds washed up, feathers torn, scientists mum